Hello again, gamers and gamettes, and welcome to another episode of Not So Hardcore Gaming. I'm your host, Jeremy, and today I have back once again, for the first time in a while, Blaze.
Hey guys.
Now, as we just said, it has been a while since we've had Blaze in an episode. I've been trying new things with the podcast for a while, like trying new news, that sort of thing, and finding time to have Blaze on has been a bit difficult for a while, but we've finally been able to make the time, and here we are. Now, today's topic is one I've been quite excited about. We're going to be going into a little bit of concept art for Bloodborne 2. I've talked about Bloodborne on the podcast before in a couple of episodes with Blaze. Which, first of all, Blaze is the one who actually introduced me to Bloodborne to begin with. I probably mentioned that in the original episode, but without him saying, yeah, you really got to play this, I probably wouldn't have. At the time, I wasn't that into difficult combat games, but for this, it was something new to try. It was something to talk about on the podcast, and in the end, I really fell in love with the game a lot. So, discussing Bloodborne 2 is an interesting thing for me, and we will talk in a later episode about lore, but today we're just talking about concept art. And with all that said, let's get into it. So when we were looking at some of the concept art, we watched Vartividya's Bloodborne art contest competition, and it had a lot of very unique aspects on it.
A lot of beautiful ideas in that video.
Yeah, so some of the most incredible artwork I've seen. And for the moment, the main one we'll discuss, at least for this first segment, is Thomas Chamberlain Keen's entry to the contest, which I believe won it.
He was tied first.
Tied first, yeah. And so to start, it's a desert land. Now,
I wouldn't say desert, like very barren, borderline desert.
Yeah, it's barren is the best word for it. But whenever you do something like that, there's a lot of potential for some incredible artwork, and because there has to be quite a lot of detail, but at the same time having little going on. So it's a difficult thing to master, really. And what we see from it is beautiful. The first picture we see is a concept art for your character walking wounded through a barren land where there's, first of all, the beautiful contrast between the sky and where it meets the land itself. Obviously, I've always loved that, like looking on the horizon and seeing where it's like the land drops off, and this is a beautiful representation of that.
The color palette in this image is just beautiful, and if a game could replicate exactly like that, it would look beautiful.
Yeah.
The clear sky, a nice deep sort of aqua blue. The white sand and the orange sand meeting is like a reflection. The colors, the shadows, the blood dredging through the sand, it all looks absolutely stunning. It was a beautiful color palette he's chosen there.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I like to think with this as well, with how detailed the graphics are for the picture at least, I like to think if Bloodborne 2 were brought out, it would be on the newer consoles, which have some incredible graphical capability, ray tracing, that sort of thing. And to see a desert land like this through all of that, there's a hell of a lot of potential for it. And for this specific picture, it's as we said, the contrast is beautiful, and it's obviously Bloodborne-esque because that's what it's supposed to be, but it's enough that it could be considered a completely different game, and that's one thing I quite like.
I like how he's kept the original health, stamina, echoes, and insight bars. Those, I love those in the first game. They got a few little different touches to them in this one, but the just keeping the same standard there is beautiful. It really adds something, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's because, you know, for example, like with Dark Souls, they had to keep things similar to a degree because, you know, it's the same game. You have to have something similar to the first game, and for this, it's the menu. That sort of stuff needs to, I think, be the same. Otherwise, it just wouldn't feel right. It needs to be quite similar, at least. But yeah, it's, as I said, it's obviously a reimagining of Bloodborne, but it is blended beautifully with uniqueness as well as nostalgia. And, you know, nostalgia is not often used for a game which is less than 10 years old, but really I think that's what this is. Bloodborne is one of the most loved games ever made, with good reason. And, you know, and this is one thing I think we need to mention. When you look at the idea of making Bloodborne 2, there is a lot that could go right, but there is a lot that could go wrong.
I don't think Bloodborne 2 could possibly live up to the hype. Like Bloodborne 1 was such a mastered game. It was perfect the way it was, and to try and make a perfect game even more perfect with a sequel is borderline impossible. Not many games have done it. You know, you had Assassin's Creed 2, which was a perfect game. Try and follow it up with Brotherhood, but it didn't happen. So you got a lot of things that could go wrong, a lot of things that could go right, but I don't think a Bloodborne 2, because of how well the community loves the game, how perfect it is in a game itself, there could be, it could really make or break From Software's image. If they mess it up, that could be a big hit for them. If they don't mess it up, it could be really successful. So it's a big deal when you think of it in the sense that Bloodborne was such a popular game.
Yeah, there's, when it comes to Bloodborne, I really cannot think of much to criticize with it, you know, and I think a lot of people agree with that. The only comment people really had were, "Oh, it's too difficult," and
those people need to man up.
Well, those people are never going to, like, they're never going to go and get Bloodborne 2 if they don't like it, so they don't really matter in this. All the people who would play Bloodborne 2 are the people who have played the original, and whenever you make a sequel, people will pick it apart down to the minutest detail, and as that's why it's sort of quite worrying to a degree that there's so much that, as we said, could go wrong, but I love to look at it and think there is so much potential in this. I'd love to see this. This looks beautiful, that sort of thing, and that's what we're here to do, really.
I feel sorry for people who started Bloodborne and never got to experience fully. Like, it was, for me, I was the same. I looked at Bloodborne, I bought Bloodborne because I thought, this will be good, but then I started playing it, and I got to the first boss, the cleric beast, and I died, you know, hundreds of times. I stopped playing it. I didn't play it for about a year after that, and then I plugged it back in, and I was like, let's try this again. We plugged it back in, we tried it, and I experienced it in a way that I thought, I loved it in a way I thought I'd never love a game. You know, I almost married the game if I could. Like, it was such a good game once you forgot how difficult it was and just immersed yourself in the beauty of the game and how smooth it ran, how perfectly designed all the enemies and the bosses were, the lore, the very in-depth lore behind it.
Was one bit I really admired about it was that you can't necessarily say there was a story, there was lore. You know, you had to hunt down all the details of it. There was a basic story of you have to go and kill these things to cure yourself, or whichever ending you decide to go with. The story itself was basic concept, but there is so much lore written into it, and that was one of my favourite bits about it.
And it's so hidden. And that makes it fun. Like, once you get that first gameplay, that first playthrough finished, you sort of think to yourself, I want to go back and find all that lore. You gotta you gotta fight for it. You gotta find it. You know, it's amazing.
Yeah. You know, well, when I first tried it, and this was before I was able to get my own PlayStation, Blaze was shown, and he was helping me to experience it a little bit. And I remembered at the time, I just said, "No, I don't think I'm going to play this. I'm not a fan of it." But what actually made me play it was the podcast, and that's why I decided to do it. And I ended up falling in love with it, and I think that's the important thing, is giving it a chance. And that's exactly what needs to be done for Bloodborne 2, is people need to really give it that chance and see it as its own game. Because just like with all the Dark Souls being completely different stories, it's the same concept but a different game, and that's how this needs to be done. That's how I look at it. So back onto what we were saying with the concept art for it. One of the bits with the art, and it affects the lore as well, is it has a concept for the doll from the first game. She's obviously, something has separated her from the dream. She's gone on her own. As I said, that's more of a lore thing, and we'll discuss some of that in the next episode. But for this part of it, you've got an image of the doll. You can't even really tell it is the doll until you look at context photos provided, or pictures provided rather. But the look of the cloaked, almost the shredded as well, and that is one thing I love with it, is old tattered clothes. You know, it's been aged. You know, it's lovely. And she's got probably the sickest weapon I've ever seen. Very reminiscent to German's scythe.
Well, it looks exactly like German's scythe from this angle.
Yeah.
On her back.
And that to me is also quite interesting. It's got stuff to tell there. And because this was a concept art, obviously there is lore that the creator has himself imagined. But just from a graphical standpoint, the sheer quality of it is beautiful, and I love, you know, the anonymity behind it. You know, I love when you have this shrouded in mystery, which she already was, but you know, she's even more now. Really, I can't do it justice, but it looks beautiful. And that's just a little bit. So we'll move to the next part of it. So the next art piece is probably one of the most important. It's this concept art version of the Hunter's Dream. And obviously the Hunter's Dream in the original, and this is one thing, it was relatively small, but the artwork in it was beautiful. It fit with the rest of the game, but it also became its own thing, and it was very detailed. But this concept art version of it, I gotta admit, I kind of think it trumps it a little bit for me. It's small. It's like a little campground, almost. But first of all, the view from the back, the horizon of it, you've got swirling clouds, which are always one of the most beautiful things for it.
If done correctly.
Yeah. And you've got the light rays slowly going through so you see a lot of shadow, you see a lot in it. You got some of that in the original Bloodborne, and this is one detail that I think makes it similar, is the background look for it. That's really one of the most important things when you go for any textures or any place in a game, is there has to be the foreground, there has to be a lot of detail there, otherwise it just looks empty and soulless, you know?
I mean, sometimes if the colour palette's right in the background, it can look beautiful, but the clouds and all that just really adds something to the background, and it makes it look, as you said, less empty. But even if the colour palette's right with an emptiness, it still looks beautiful, you know?
Yeah. It's one of the make or break details. If you just make one slight error in it, it can really, people look at it, it's displeasing. But for this concept art, I think this is one of the most beautiful backgrounds I've seen. But on the intangible part of it, it's very much a campground. It's nice and small. It's got a little hovel, for want of a better word. It's not
like a clay hut, something you'd see in Egypt.
It's quite makeshift, and it has that charm to it. You know, in the original there was an established mansion,
like a Victorian horror style mansion.
Yeah, and I loved the look of it, but I think for this particular one, the makeshift way of the look of it, the blend into nature, the campground look really, really appeals to me.
I'm personally not a fan.
Yeah.
Like the concept is good, but I don't know, the building itself I'm just not a fan of. I think there was something about the Hunter's Dream in Bloodborne 1 that astonished me. The building, you know, it wasn't just the building, it was the gravestones. It had so much going on in it. You know, the doll moved around, Gurman moved around. And with this area, it doesn't look like there's much room for movement, for change, for a cycle, and it just looks a little plain.
I can concur on that, but what I also think here is we're seeing just practically a 2D image. We're seeing this small one snippet of it. You know, there's a lot more detail that can be added in, and if you were to take a picture of Bloodborne and you see just the mansion in the distance a little bit, it wouldn't be as good as it is now. So I like to look at it, I think, imagine if this were fully fleshed out, fully detailed, and that's how I'm looking at it. And as I said, I don't know really why, but the look of it, the way the building is done, being nice and simple and small, it really, really appeals to me. Moving on to the next part. This next one is personally my favourite part of this concept art collage, so to speak. We have a desert land ruins, very much like what you would see in Egypt. You know, in the desert, the
Egypt,
old buildings are decrepit.
Or even better, like an Afghanistanian sort of Middle Eastern country, even. There's
buildings that they hold a lot of age in them. You know, you look at them and you think they're crumbling. They've been standing there for so long. What have you seen? You know?
Yeah, they got a lot of wisdom, like Gandalf of buildings. You know?
Yeah, and I love that air in any game or any movie or anything I've seen with ancient ruins. It always fascinates me, and I think to myself, I would love to just go and watch everything that's happened. And this really, really just switches that in my head.
It's the colours. It's just the colours are what really gets me, and the fact that it's people think desert, it's going to be lifeless and empty, but this desert-looking area is full of what used to be, and it has still got life left in it.
Yeah, you look at it and you think, it was once widely populated, but now, it's like with only the strong survive. There are fewer living creatures in it, but those that you see, they have a lot of age in them as well, and it's sort of it does have a lot of life in the sense that it has had life previously, and it just keeps that air about it.
I was going to point out, I loved how Bloodborne it was all dark, it was all run at night time, because it was a nightmare, it was supposed to be dark, and I really loved that, but I love how this is so bright and beautiful
and vibrant,
just vibrant altogether, which makes me think, now we're not talking about lore and story, but I think if we talked about a lore and story behind this image, he wouldn't be in the dream, he would be in the real world trying to find something to get to the dream, and that would be a good concept. And this art style, can't remember what his name was, he's done this very well. He's replicated it to very well, to look very vibrant, that it could, so many different story aspects could happen to it.
Yeah, and looking at the concept art, again, it's a case, I think to myself, there is so much from a lore perspective that can be done here, and a story perspective, and I look at it and I start branching off thinking, okay, I'd love it if this explained why that particular building was there, or whatever else. There's a lot of potential for it, and as you said, one bit which is most is being during the day, it really does give a different air about things, because the nighttime, the dream, that was beautiful in its own right, but something about like during the day, there seems to be more life about everything. When it gets dark, when the night descends, it loses some of that life, that energy that you can get otherwise. So for this, really, the ruins, the lighting, the fact that there's so much distance with everything, there is so much in here which, when it all culminates, you think to yourself, this is probably going, if they were to use this particular concept art, if they were to create something around this, it would probably be the most beautiful game I've ever seen.
100% agree.
So, absolutely incredible. Now, the next bit is concept art for a weapon.
Just one weapon.
Yeah, this is the main one. And first of all, Bloodborne weapons, in the original, I loved all of them. All of them, that they looked so... Again, you had the Victorian stuff, it still could sort of fit in with it.
They were unique. They looked unique.
Yeah, and they were uncanny.
Something you've never seen before in a video game,
Yeah, exactly. And I loved when you had... when it would have like dripping blood, that sort of thing, was part of the weapon. Because everything in the lore is based around blood. A lot of the weapons were created with the power of blood, and so it really just added a nice aesthetic to it. And so as really, it's there's a lot of variety. There's a lot of different different styles of weapons, different things, and all of them have some relation to the lore. So I always love the weapons in the original, and obviously there's not going to be as many for this because it's just concept art. There's no actual game around it. But this one, first of all, the name Tendon Saber, that to me is a pretty neat name. It indicates it's like you cut it. What I think when I hear the name Tendon Saber is, you kill a boss and you get this from them. you fashion it from a living thing. That's how I get from the name. Now, from the lore perspective, I don't think that's what this is, but the name itself, it has that uncanny, cool name to it, and I like that a lot. So, first of all, we will actually read the entry it has for it. I think that is important, so you can get a bit of context. So for the reading of the entry on the weapon, I shall let Blaze take over for a minute.
So, it says, Tendon Saber, a vicious blade used to sever the Achilles. Blaze has dyslexia.
Yes.
Crafted by the Lorenites in their desperate fight against the growing scourge. In its contracted one-handed state, it is fast and effective grappling tool, allowing enemy manipulation and disarming. When expanded, it is wielded with two hands. With its extended reach, it assumes a more defensive role, incapacitating enemies from a distance.
Beautiful.
That was embarrassing.
Yeah, I know it sounds bad getting the guy with dyslexia to read it, but
I just love the look of this weapon itself. Like it looks like a sickle, but with like a katana handle. It extends, and it's just, I kind of want to chop someone up with it. Like that's what I'm thinking right now.
And one bit about it is, one of the little patterns looks almost like it has been two different weapons welded together, rather. So it looks familiar in one sense, but uncanny in another. And it's exactly as you said. It looks like something that you'd wield it and you'd think, this is awesome. The entry for it, first of all, I do very much like the entry as well.
It didn't really offer any lore. Like I noticed a lot of loading screen entries when you watch them on the first on Bloodborne. They have little lore things, and that's when we were saying about lore hunting. It's like got little lore things, and this one hasn't got any. But I reckon if this was to be expanded and made into what would be, it could be like it could have its lore, and it could have many different types of lore behind it.
Yeah, see, with the entries of all the weapons in the previous one, it fit better because you had other things giving you context, whereas this, it doesn't have much context to go with it. So for me, I look at it as if it did. I have to look at it as if, I'd have other things to look at it, and I do get a Bloodborne type vibe from this, the way it's written. Even just the formatting of the text, first of all, really gives you that vibe. And as to just the slight air of mystery around it, feels very Bloodborne to me. And it's, as I said, it's one tiny piece, and if you were to make a Bloodborne game just off these concept arts, there is a heck of a lot that could go right there, and I would love to see this in a game. So that's the main pictures we have to discuss, and to basically sum it up, this is some of the most incredible art I have ever seen. Whenever I look at something like this, I think to myself, God, I wish I could do that. I wish I had that talent, but I don't.
Yeah, I'm not a artsy fartsy, so I can't really I don't know, I've never been into art myself. I view art in the sense of I just look out the window and take in how beautiful the trees look. So for me, art. But when you're looking at a video game, it's like in another world, like in another life to look at. And so when it comes to video game art, I don't wish I could do it because that'd be too much hard work. But I do enjoy looking at other people's accomplishments.
Yeah, see, I've never been a major artsy person either, but I've never had very steady hands. so it was always difficult to do that. But I feel like if I did have a bit more of a spark of talent for it, I think I'd get a lot more enjoyment out of it. But I've never been able to do it very well, and I've never been able to enjoy it. But I look at this and I think to myself, that type of talent, that is rare. And this really is some of the most talented artwork I have ever seen. So with all the discussion about the visuals, the art, we're going to talk a little bit of ideas we would have for lore around this. Just around this concept art. In a later episode, we'll talk about what we would like to see in Bloodborne 2. But for this, we're going to discuss what we would see, what we would want to see if Bloodborne 2 looked like this. So let's get into that. For the first picture, the arid desert, I'll let Blaze take the lead on what he'd like.
So I really like, so the look of it, I'm just picturing in my head, you're wounded, right? You're very clearly wounded in the picture, but I'm just thinking in my head, you're wounded, you've escaped a dreaded, I don't know, fight with a mad one or a great one or any sort of beast. You don't know what it was. You see someone walking, you get a little worried, but then you start sensing some good from it. Then you wander over the remains of what you've just killed on the floor, bloodied. You got bloodied and beaten. You didn't gain anything from it, clearly, because the insight and echoes are still 0. But you need help, otherwise you're going to die and bleed out. And so that would be my idea for the first story point, for the first image. For the second image, you've caught up to the wanderer. You've seen they've got a scythe. You get a little scared. Well, your character gets a little scared, not you personally. You have a chat to said wanderer. The wanderer offers help, and it's got help in its cart. Gives you some of the yarn and blood. You start having a few visions. You drop, you fall. You're not used to this blood. This wanderer has come from Yar. You don't know who it is. And then for the third image of you're at the hut and you found the doll, I could see the story going in a sense that this doll, the doll, German either killed you, or everything in Yharnam has gone to crap and she's had to leave, and with whatever she's got in her cart, and she finds you in her, what's that word I'm looking for, characteristic voice that we all know. She thinks you could help her on her journey, or help bring Yharnam back to what it was. She thinks you can help her and she can help you. And so in this photo I can see you as the character. You talk to her, she tells you where she's from, what's happened there. You pick a backstory that doesn't really matter, like you did in the original Bloodborne. You sort of find out what she's about, what's going on, what that thing was, what she healed you with, why you're having visions after healing. Like, these are just little story things for me that I reckon would work very well with these sorts of images. And now with the one of the last images, you're in a level, you're trying to find an artifact that could help her, move on to where she needs to go, or save. She's come out to fix Yharnam. The artifact here is what she needs. You go try and find it. You found some armor and stuff she's given to you. I don't know. All story points like this are just really hypothetical. These little ideas I'd really enjoy to see. Some little mission ideas. You go, you find, you kill, blah blah blah. You find what you're looking for, or kill what you need to. Just something like that. and there's no really story aspect. I can talk about the sword. You pick up the sword somewhere from a dead enemy or something. But just, I could go on forever about different ideas I have about these images, but these are just the best ones I've had. Obviously, Thomas Chamberlain Keane has his own ideas, and he would have thought of these when he drew these, but these are just ideas that would match, I personally think would match very well with the images he's come up with. Make sense?
It does.
That's what I've got.
Now, for me, I'll preface this by saying two things. One, some of the ideas I have here probably wouldn't translate well onto a game, because when you have a game like Bloodborne with multiple endings, if you then base a game off something after that, you have to then say this is the canonical ending. So it may not translate well to the game, but the ideas for the lore I have, I will go into. But the other thing I wanted to say first is it actually has a quote from Thomas, who he said, "I wanted the audience to be able to speculate and piece together the lore that isn't made explicit in exactly the way we love doing with the real Bloodborne." And that is very important, because as it's there is a certain amount of detail you get from the original Bloodborne, but there are some things which are left up to the player to really think about, and that's one of the beautiful things about it. Now, the ideas that I've had for this, the first one, you're walking through the desert, there's blood all over the ground in front of you, and the idea I've had is this desert was the remnants of a great one who's died. They've then made this land. It has arisen from their remnants. It's still got traces of their blood, their tissues in parts of it, but it's happened so long ago now that it's really too long to be able to see what's happened. You're wounded, you're suffering from Scourge, you need help, and you see a figure in the distance. Well, you get up close and the figure seems standoffish at first. You talk for a bit. You don't want to fight. Clearly you're wounded. You cannot fight even if you wanted to. So you get her talking. She tells you she is travelling alone. The lore aspect I've had I don't think would be expressly stated by her, but the idea I've had is she used to be tied to the dream. Then a hunter came along and helped battle the Scourge and killed the Great One, Moon Presence. When that happened, the dream ceased to exist, but the doll survived. She's gone travelling with the old hunter, who is now transcended to a Great One. She has been looking after them, wants them to reach their full power. And what she does is she gives you some of their blood, and that the power of your previous hunters now being a Great One, that is what now lets you can become like your own version of the dream. You use that power to let you go and do what you need to do. So what she needs you to do is go and battle to get more Great One remnants or blood to help fully mature her now. She's caring for the hunter. She needs this to be able to get them to full strength so they can finally get rid of the Scourge. And that's what your goal is. You go to different lands, you battle through other Great Ones to help reach your full power for the new Great One. And that's the idea I've had. That's what the lore is. I look at it and I think that would be, again, it would be a bit controversial because it indicates that only one of the Bloodborne endings is the true ending. Yeah. So, as it wouldn't translate into a game as well, but say a movie based off it. And that's the idea I have, is really it's a continuation of it, and it tells you more that happened after the events of Bloodborne. And that's where my mind goes to, and I like the thought of that.
I do quite like that. That is indeed very good.
Yeah, so this is like little ideas we've had. As I said, in reality, I doubt we would see something like this happening, least of all with our lore, because we're not obviously as creative as the people who have worked on Bloodborne previously. But this is what we would think to ourselves, it would be cool to see that for this particular concept art. And to reiterate everything, basically, it's some of the most incredible artworks I've seen through this concept art. There's an insane amount of detail, and as the author of the artist himself said, really it's up to you to speculate on what you think would what these images would mean. And that's the beautiful thing about them, is they're just images, but they become what you want them to become.
Definitely.
So this is the first episode. We've talked about just the concept art, what we think would happen around it, and really this has been a lot of fun. It's good theorizing about it. It's good discussing the lore and the artwork itself. There will be a part 2 where we'll talk about more, hopefully, what we'd like to see for it, on our own ideas, not based off artwork we've seen. We'll discuss things we think could go right, could go wrong, potential, more in depth. But that will be for another time. And this is the end of today's episode.
Thank you for having me on, Jeremy. I have thoroughly missed being on. I hope to come on a bit more later on.
It's really good to have you back. I'm sure the viewers would love it. And yeah, I've really enjoyed this. So, that's all she wrote. Thank you very much for joining us on today's episode. There will be more later. I will see you next week, and you have a good one.